Hello, how's it going?
Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
this is Strange Flows. I am here today with Matt Wilder and Chloe Valentine. Matt has been on the podcast in the past. He is a screenwriter, perhaps most famously for writing the movie Dog Eat Dog, which Paul Schrader directed. And I'm just meeting Chloe. We
He's
spoke
a
on the phone
director
yesterday.
too. He's a director
Yeah,
too.
please say
I
director. Take out
He's
apologize.
screenwriter,
Yes.
mostly
put
a
in director.
director. Your name here, Bill Pullman, which leads into what I do, which is PR. So
No, I committed a faux pas there, obviously, with
No.
Hollywood and especially
we love
especially
you
movies. You know, the
anyway.
screenwriters are the least important people in town. That's obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but Matt is not merely a screenwriter, but also a director, a filmmaker.
No, I am too.
Um,
He's
We'll
an
just say
yeah,
writer
auteur. He
director.
does
That's
it
good
all.
enough.
he does it all indeed. And yeah, but anyway, Chloe, we've just met, but this podcast, you know, it's my pod, but I will give you credit. This episode that we're going to do today was your brainchild in many ways. We're going to be discussing the Godfather Part Three, which I thought I'd seen earlier in life, but when I attempted to what I thought was rewatch it, I soon realized that I had never in fact seen it, and I kind of listened to I guess the critical and commercial consensus of circa 1990 and viewed it as a lesser installment in the franchise. But I really liked it, so I owe you some credit for A, getting me to watch it, and B, sort of having the idea to do this episode on it. But before we get deep
You're so
into
kind. It's
Godfather
like
lore,
flabbergasting. I mean,
I
you're gonna go far. No, most people
think
are not that way. My
I think
Maddie is that way. Matt David Wilder, I mean.
yeah,
Oh,
you're
Anyway. No,
flanked
but
by Matt's on this one. Yeah,
no, but in the arts world, it's. I think it's so important as a director. Matthew Wilder loves to bring out the best in others.
oh,
yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, but that's
No,
what
I
you
think
do.
I view, filmmaking can be that kind of collaborative medium for sure, where it's not just, we're talking about the director screenwriter dichotomy here, but I'm sure Matt would agree with this. You know, it's you're collaborating with others and you're bringing out the best in your performers, producers, other artists on set. And I do approach podcasting similarly. It's always as much about anyone I'm interviewing as it is about me, if not more so. So,
Well, that makes
um,
it a treat.
I think we'll go far today. I guess before we get deep into Godfather lore, though, I don't know if this is that interesting of a story, but just to kind of orient listeners and even to orient myself, how did you two sort of first meet? You've been connected online for a while, right?
No, we've been connected in life for a while.
Since
Yes.
2011.
Is it really that far back?
Well, that's when we first met physically do you remember the lady who was
Oh yeah.
there and Bill got pause?
Wait, was that? No, that wasn't the first meeting. I thought the first meeting was with
Oh no, the first
your
wait.
friend, the
Oh God, Los Angeles. I always oh,
Bambi Chainsaw, some uh
oh.
drug-addled rocker who we won't
But
name.
well, no, she was not on drugs. She was on a TV show though. Actually,
No, don't say.
yeah, we can't
We're gonna get in
say.
trouble. We're gonna
We're
get in
gonna get
trouble.
in trouble. Damn
I
it, we've
see.
got to eat.
It's really
Well,
a PS,
people
not
you've heard of.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Suffice it
Anyway,
to say, it was important Hollywood adjacent people that tied
No,
into. Oh,
no,
okay.
unimportant. Highly
unimportant,
Unimportant.
unimportant.
but working. And I cried when I first. There were tears in the first meeting.
Not because of
Warmth.
me, please say.
No, no, you were an angel. I was going to say no. Matthew Fairley rescued me and showed such empathy, and then we fell in friend love. And
Oh,
he's a genius.
And the
He
rest
you're
is
a
makes me
history, I
genius.
mad
suppose. Yeah.
sometimes, and I screech. But no, but you know what? Again, I think that's what a good director does. Is Coppola like that? How does he work?
I
Well,
wonder. I mean, do you have any insight, Matt? Yeah.
yeah, our friend Vincent Gallo told us that at least at one point when he was shooting Tetro, that Coppola would shoot rehearsals for hours, and then would show, like there'd be like sort of 16 frames on a computer, and he would say, "Okay, I like the way you moved your head on line number one. Then I like the quietness of line number two, and so on." and would give notes and would hope that you would assemble this into some kind of a cubist painting.
I
Now,
kind of love
I don't know if
that.
he still does that, but
No, he did this for actors, like to then do another take,
in
or he in
Tetro, yeah, to
post.
do another
Yeah,
take. Like they would rehearse it, they would rehearse a scene, and he would give them notes from the rehearsals of here's the 10 things I liked.
I say.
Which to me seems insane, but I think incredibly that's a great movie, and Gallo gives his best performance on film in that movie, so it works somehow.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it sounds like maybe Coppola's not quite Stanley Kubrick level reputation for taking doing a million takes, but in that direction. Would that be fair?
Uh, yeah, I just have to say one thing to you guys. I need to leave here in about
No.
15 minutes, so I wonder if I
Okay, you
can
guys get
say
into
a
the
few.
film.
What's that?
Yeah, no, yeah.
No, I said go into the film, you
Well, I
two.
just wanted to say a few words, and hopefully, I know you guys' take on this is very psychosexual political, but I wanted to just give a sort of a cinephilic take for
For
a
sure.
brief moment to just um, throw a few crumbs out that maybe you will pick up, or maybe the listeners will um, find of interest. Um, 1990. This is a thing that I think is a little bit forgotten about Godfather 3. It was this strange, sometimes there are these moments where there are like 3 or 4 movies that are the same thing coming out at the same time.
Yeah.
The fall of 1990 was the fall of gangsterism,
That's
and
right.
it was the fall of State of Grace, Phil Joanou's movie, which I don't know if you guys have seen that recently. It was very beloved at the
Yeah.
time, but it's a very hammy kind of it's a parade of meatballs, Ed Harris and Sean Penn and so on, who are really hamming it up to the max. Hasn't held
The
up great, but
Grifters.
people love it. The Grifters was in there.
Yeah.
Miller's Crossing, which I think is probably
Oh,
the Coen brothers' artiest movie.
Yeah.
A very
beautiful.
very beautiful. Dashiell Hammett inflected,
Ooh.
based on Red Harvest. But very strangely lugubrious and kind of robotic movie for them. And then Francis's movie came out at Christmas, but the movie that snuck in there and blew everything to bits, obviously, is a little film by Martin Scorsese called Goodfellas.
Right.
And
Ooh.
no one thinks about these movies next to
No,
each
I
other, but
didn't think of Goodfellas. I
they
think of
came
it as
out
so separate.
they came
Wow.
out next to each other, and
The same
I
year.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
I was there at the time, and I can say that Goodfellas blew the doors off of the whole Godfather concept, because the thesis of the movie is this is not like Francis's Gordon Willis beautiful chiaroscuro photography, guys in the back room. It was shot in bright sunshine, and it's about a bunch of mooks who hit you over the head with a brick and take your watch.
And
That's
can
what
I
really
just
what he
add rock and
viewed.
roll?
Say again?
All the rock and roll. Can I just
Yeah,
add rock and roll? It was
right.
amazing just now when you drew that parallel, because I was thinking of just the sound of like the Two Jakes as another sequel, or all these
That's a good one. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
quiet, when you said lugubrious with Miller's Crossing, what a quiet or less saturated. I mean,
Yeah.
Goodfellas could have been made today. I mean that.
Oh yeah. I remember saying at the time it was like the only non-musical movie that I can remember that made people want to get up and dance in the theater.
Ah,
Right. Right.
And I think that's still kind of true, but it took away the sort of the mystique of the mafia in Dark Shadows, and said these were just a bunch of blue collar guys trying to get over like anybody else.
So
And
you
that was, people
view.
forget this,
Yeah.
but it was mind blowing at the time, because Francis's mythology had really settled in people's minds, and that's how we viewed organized
but
crime.
they weren't funny gangsters. You know what I mean? I mean, Goodfellas is hilarious. It's
Yeah.
really amazing when you're talking about this, because I think of all the other films you mentioned, none of them were a barrel of laughs.
Right, it's one of the funniest movies
Right.
ever made.
Yeah, whereas I suppose, I love the Godfather franchise. I love this third installment even, and
Oh,
obviously the first two are classics. But it's hard to, yeah. There's not a. Is there a single funny moment in like any of them?
oh yeah,
Is
I
that
just saw
unfair to
two.
say?
Yeah, the wife.
I saw
Yeah.
two on Friday, and it has a lot of funny shit.
Okay. I'm overstating it, but compared to Goodfellas, it's not as like fun of a movie, and it does
No,
take
no, no,
its
no, no,
subject
no.
very, very seriously, and it's more shadowy. It's about family. All these things are wonderful, but you're saying, and maybe I'm overstating this, but are you saying Goodfellas is in a way like the anti-Godfather?
I
Hmm.
think I think Scorsese is as with as much respect as he has for Coppola, and I know he does, would say, yeah, totally. It is completely the anti-Godfather.
Yeah, no, I
Uh,
never thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I'm thinking
I
of
think it's
Paul
opposite
Thomas
in every way.
Anderson now.
Sig-
I think I'm
yeah.
thinking of P.T. Anderson and this sort of because life is funny, even if you're a gangster, it is
Right.
funny. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? There are funny moments with the foot and the, grill. But how do you think
Hmm.
do you think that affected the reception of Godfather 3?
Oh yeah, I think hugely. Yeah, hugely
Yeah.
it did. So just quickly, that was just the other thing I wanted to touch on was that it was, the reception was pretty disastrous in 1990. It was a real shocker to everyone when Godfather 3 was nominated for Best Picture and Best, I think Francis got Best Director, but it got some real Oscar nods and everyone was kind of like, what? It was just sort of an
Yeah.
inheritance from the other two pictures, I think.
Hmm.
Now the film is, there's a class that some millennial film critics and also Richard Brody have sort of erected of the unjustly neglected elephant movie, which we would put Heaven's Gate and Eyes Wide Shut in that category. And they
Hmm.
definitely, those people who are into these unjustly neglected films now worship at the altar of Godfather 3.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that has arisen again as a sort of and having an afterlife as this movie that was Ishtar is another one. These movies
Hmm.
that are unjustly neglected. It has sort of risen to that point. Um, just very quickly, I just want to bomb through these notes. Jay
Yeah.
Hoberman, a
Perfect. Yeah.
great critic, um, said that he compared Godfather 3 to the two unfortunate sequels that Mark Twain wrote to Huckleberry Finn. Tom
I didn't
Sawyer
even
Mm.
know the
does
two.
this
Oh,
and
okay,
that.
Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
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 And he
What's the other
suggested that
sequel?
I can't remember the two names. They're
Ah,
super forgettable and they're never anthologized.
Tom Sawyer
Um,
books. Yeah.
he suggested that the real sequels to Godfather 2 would be Goodfellas and Brian De Palma's Scarface.
ooh.
That those are
Right.
really those are the Godfather Part 3.
Yeah.
They're sort of inheritors of it. Um, and then I think just the last thing I wanted to just note was to kind of wonder at where this is in the body of Francis's work. He had an incredible run in the 70s, then in the 80s. There's some people who really love these 80s movies. I think they're almost all pretty dreadful. And this is sort of a midway point between his 70s triumphs and then his later vineyard sponsored indie films, which I think are terrific, but are kind of
Yeah.
neglected.
Gotcha.
So anyway,
Um. Yeah. I mean, I
that's just
guess the only thing.
what I leave you with.
No, I really appreciate, and I'll let you go. I know you're kind of just making a brief
But wait,
appearance at the
I have a
top.
question for both
Yeah.
of you about this. Do you feel that Francis with Coda sort of rejiggered this and sort of this is the vineyard again? In other words, I feel like he almost has reopened the franchise and
Well,
wants Sophia
With
to take over.
right, with the recut he released in 2020, you
Right,
mean?
with the
Yeah.
recut. I feel like he sort of reopened it so that it could become another Coppola Vineyard. In other words,
hmm.
she had a rough debut, I feel, with her performance there, and she had to claw her way out of that, become her own Spike Jones, like indie filmmaker, cool girl. I
An
feel
interesting
almost as
story. Yeah.
though it's
I just said it's a fascinating story with Sophia that she started this way being maligned. We'll talk more about this later, but maligned for her performance, and now became cool and like one of the most prominent female directors
Matt
in
Wilder,
Hollywood.
have
Yeah,
you?
yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to shout, but I
it's
got
okay.
to know
Yeah,
because he's just a little bit older than we are. Not well, I'm not your age.
Oh, I
I mean,
am.
between the two of you.
I'm
But
heck older.
Matt, when did it change for Sophia? When did she go from being Mary, the bad performance, to amazing filmmaker? Like, when did
Oh,
that shift?
it's entirely Virgin Suicides, and it was it's something
Mm.
that I think couldn't happen now because I think in our internet world people are sort of threaded together. Like you can't forget about him. Like everyone had forgotten about her at that point because she had this much hated performance, which I suspect you guys agree with me. I think it plays pretty okay now. I think
it does.
she's
Yeah,
okay in the movie.
It's okay
She's
until the
charming.
last scene. It's the way she says it because yeah, it's.
But it was, I mean, you guys have no idea. I don't think there was ever a single performance in my lifetime that was more laughed at than that. And
Well,
I
that
suspect
I
when,
do remember because years later
yeah.
somebody said I looked like her and I was upset. I remember everyone. I was like 10 years old and everyone was making fun of her. Like it trickled down that much.
it was incredibly hated. And I think, Winona Ryder says that Francis was mean to her on Dracula. And I think it was because Winona dropped out of playing
Right.
that part at the last minute. And then he had to bring his daughter in and she got her ass kicked, unfortunately. But no, she rebounded with, she directed her first film with Virgin Suicides in '99, which is I think a perfect film. And everyone lost their minds. And I think people just, it's another time people just segued into, oh, well, she's a great filmmaker. Okay, that's good enough. And away she went. I don't know if you could pull that off now.
I don't think you could because I think people have longer, not even longer memory, but like a more cemented view, via social media of who a person is.
Right. They got the receipts on you for
exactly.
whatever.
Receipts, yeah.
But it's amazing.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame we won't let artists grow because, she took a long time. That's 9 years. Is that 9 years in between two films?
Yeah, 9 years, but within the same decade, so she before the 90s were out, she went from one thing to drastically another, which is pretty impressive.
All right, kids, I have to bugger out, but have a beautiful day. And I'm really interested to hear, I don't know if Matt, can I hear this at the end of the day and see where you guys went with this?
Oh yeah. I'll obviously I'll post it, but I'll send you the audio. You'll be the first to get the audio.
Awesome. All right. Have a beautiful day, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Enjoy your conversation. Bye.
Wilder.
All right. Take care, Matt.
I love that perspective with Goodfellas because I never really thought of what a different movie, right? Like what a different
I maybe didn't have when I only saw Goodfellas for the first time basically during the pandemic.
Oh wow.
I was streaming and
what did you think
I didn't
of
really
it?
have I love it. I mean there's a part of me that may like Casino more just because I'm such a Vegas nut, but
I like Casino more too.
Yeah, but they're both really, really good movies. They're both perfect movies, in a way. But I thought of it like, okay, this is another one of the gangster classics. I'd also watched like Sopranos around that same time. I kind of binged on all of this stuff around the same time. I'd seen The Godfather earlier in high school. But so I didn't see them like back to back. So what separates them hadn't really been as apparent. But the way Matt put it made a lot of sense. I mean,
I never even thought about the difference. Just in terms of, like I said, the volume of the movie. And I agree with you. I prefer Casino because it's sort of like Goldilocks and the Bear. To me, the tempo of it and the seriousness of it, I would say it's in between Goodfellas and Godfather too. It's kind of right in there for me.
Yeah. It finds some more shades of gray, I guess, whereas Goodfellas is a very nuanced, multifaceted movie too, of course, but Goodfellas is like an adrenaline shot, kind of from start to finish, whereas Casino,
it gets
they're
a little
both good.
cartoony.
Yeah, I view them almost as they're not a Goodfellas and Casino are not part of a franchise, but I do view them
I
like
think
as
of
kind of
them,
being of a piece
they're
for sure.
companion pieces. It's Pesci. It's
Yeah,
Pesci. It's Pesci as the you wanna, you know. But
it's almost the
wait,
same character in a funny way. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
totally tough character. He was once at a friend's birthday party. He is adorable in real life and not like short seeming. He's got a huge presence. Cool guy. But wait, I don't want to
yeah.
take us off track and have us making everybody snore. What were we talking about?
Well, we can keep it grounded in the Godfather Part Three, I guess. I'm glad Matt was able to get his thoughts in there on it, but we can go in any direction now. I mean, I know we want to talk about these kind of Newsom Pelosi. This is kind of an idea of yours, but I definitely co-sign on it in terms of the how the I mean, yeah, you want to speak to that?
Well, I
You
was
that
going to
was
say,
kind
to
of
me,
your
it's
original
the
seed about it. Yeah,
politics of the church. So right now, so
yeah,
Gavin, went to Santa Clara University. His father was an operator, California political scene,
right.
married into the Paul Pelosi's family, Nancy born D'Alessandro, Catholic, father,
Yeah.
state representative, then House of Reps, Baltimore
Hmm.
mayor, Nixon appointee. I mean, so these are people who've been, and of course, not Nixon, pardon me,
Hmm.
rewind that back. I meant JFK, who is,
Yeah.
of course, our first Catholic president. So anyway, for me, it's about the politics and the sort of machinations of the Catholic Church, which to me, back to the city states of Venice and everything, has always been not just a religious institution about the faith, but political. It's a political institution, and
Yeah.
it gives sort of majesty and sort of almost a royal air.
Yeah. No, no, certainly. And
Well, right now
I grew up
Nancy's in
Catholic.
trouble.
Yeah.
I just want to add that very quickly with a certain I believe he's an archbishop of San Diego. He refused her communion, but the Pope did give her communion. This was a couple of years ago over Roe v. Wade, which I thought
Yeah,
was
I
very
kind of remember
interesting.
this. It's fascinating. So I grew up Catholic. I speak with some experience on this, I guess. I mean, and this isn't exactly
Which
news to anybody.
denomination of Catholic? Like which
Oh,
like
just Roman Catholic. Yeah. Um,
not like
if that's what you're asking.
Franciscan or what
Oh,
order,
I
I
mean,
guess.
one does not really grow up with any of, you know what I mean? Like, the Franciscan order, the Jesuits, these are like religious orders within Catholicism. It's like a priest will be a Franciscan, a Dominican, a Jesuit, a nun might be, there's Franciscan nuns as well. But as a lay person, you're kind of like, you're just Catholic, basically, is how
So,
that works.
so is there
Yeah.
actually a difference? Because on the conspiracy racket or the conspiracy, like let's say the conspiracy world, the Jesuits, right? Like they
Right.
get a lot of
Yeah.
flack. Is there
Right.
anything to that, Matt? Is
Oh,
there anything there?
you're not asking someone who's going to say something super definitive on this, but it is a realm of interest. I mean, I like the Jesuits in a lot of ways. I once even for a minute in college wondered because I was practicing even still in college. I wondered if I should join them. So
Now,
I
what does
do
that mean?
speak.
Join them? Were you going to be a
Uh,
priest?
I thought about it for a minute freshman year. I'll
Whoa,
say that. Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
wait. Rewind. How did you? What made you? Please tell me. What made you want to
I
be a
think
priest?
that well, yeah, I think ultimately I did not want to be a priest, which is why I
Right,
didn't
but
go that
what
route.
I guess what
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think so. I'd kind of reconnected with my faith at the beginning of college, and Jesuits. This speaks to the question about conspiracy as well. They're very much entrenched within education and higher education.
Yeah,
They're really good teachers. I
Georgetown.
will say that. Yeah, Georgetown is probably the most prominent Jesuit university in the country, but there's many more. Gonzaga Jesuit University, Loyola Marymount here in LA. Any
Fordham,
college,
DJT. Yeah.
Fordham's another major one. But even at non-Jesuit universities, I went to Cornell. Like a lot of like campus ministries are very Jesuit. And this
And
was the
what
case
makes
at
them
Cornell. Yeah.
Jesuit in terms of the teaching method? Like I know we supposedly in the intelligence community, there's supposedly a lot of Mormons. I don't know
Right.
Mitt
No, I think
Romney,
it's a
but
similar. Yeah,
what's the
I think
teaching with Jesuits?
I think it's a similar sort of thing to that with Mormons being in the intelligence community. In that, well, okay, same and different. I think with Mormons, it's just it has to do with like the trustedness of their character or something. I mean, maybe there's other people who know more about that than me in terms
Because
of
I
why
mean,
Mormons are trying. But with Jesuits, I
there's
think
the
it's
group
both.
part,
Yeah.
but there's the faith part. In other words, is there something different in the way Jesuits like what makes a Jesuit versus another type of
Yeah.
Catholic?
The technical answer has to, it's so to just give a little history. The Jesuit order was founded by Saint Ignatius of Loyola, ergo all the
Yes.
Loyola University names. What stands out to me in my memory of sort of talking to Jesuits is sort of their methods of discernment, their teachings about sort of finding, your path and your mission in the world, which very much ties into the political dimensions of being a Jesuit, and they are the most sort of left-leaning Catholic, certainly the most left-leaning group of priests would be Jesuits, and I think they're
Are they the
the
most
tag
politically active, or am I just
probably
imagining this? Because when I
there's
watch them, they seem to be quite politically
I
active, more so.
that I think that you could say that they're the most politically. I think that would be fair to say that they're the most politically active order of priests. There's other ones that are also politically active, but certainly the ones that are the most involved in political discourse on Earth, and probably, without wading too far into conspiracies that I don't know a lot about, probably the group of priests that have like influenced real politics the most, famously, and to the horror of
I don't think
right-leaning
it's a
Catholics.
conspiracy. I think they're coincidence theorists. No, really, really.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
I
To the
mean, we
horror of
have an
right-leaning
ambassador
Catholics. Sorry, the ambassador.
to the Holy See, who, I mean, I don't know who it is
Right.
now, but it had been Newt. But sorry, go on. You were talking about the real politic influence of
Oh,
certain Catholics or certain
yeah.
Jesuits, rather.
Famously, the most, I guess, concrete laying out of like a left-wing Catholic socialism is this thing called
Yeah.
liberation theology, and that was Jesuits. And the Pope is obviously, I don't even know if it's quite fair to say that he's really left-leaning, but he's definitely one of the more obviously progressive popes ever, certainly, and one of the more visibly progressive Catholics we've
Well,
had
I
in the
remember there
world.
was
And he's,
quite
of
a
course, a
panic
Jesuit.
that he was going to be a Jesuit Pope, and I didn't know what that meant. Like, I was baptized Catholic. I'm half Jewish, but that's on my father's side, kind of raised more Presbyterian, but still would go to
Gotcha.
synagogue.
Yeah.
Not too much
Oh,
time in Catholic Church, but I remember there was a big panic, really, like, or it was considered like, wow, a Jesuit Pope. And I'm like, a Pope is a Pope to me at the time. I still,
right.
as I find out more, I think it's interesting
I
in
think
terms of
maybe
the
that comes down
liberation
to,
theology,
yeah, well,
immigration, this sort of thing.
well, yeah, you can separate some of these things. I mean, immigration, you do, and you pointed this out when you were going over the show notes. Like, people, right when people like give Jews a hard time, obviously, because there's this perception that Jews are pro-immigration, but the Catholic Church, not even just Jesuits, but across denomination lines, tend to be very pro-immigration. Jesuits certainly are part of that, but that goes across party lines. Liberation theology doesn't even deal with immigration so much as like actual socialism, like citing Karl Marx positively, socialism. And in fairness to Pope Francis, I don't think he is even though he's a Latin American Jesuit, which the liberation theology folks were. I don't think it would be at all fair to say that Pope Francis is a proponent of liberation theology per se. But he's left of center.
Was he the
in many
Pope
ways.
when
Yeah.
you wanted to join the Jesuits?
No, so he was a Jesuit much earlier. I mean, he when he was ordained a Jesuit. I'm trying to remember what the year was, but it was basically in the 70s. So he had a long career as a
No,
Jesuit in
no, I mean,
Latin
was
America.
he already our Pope? In other words, he was the Pope when you wanted to become a Jesuit, or no?
Vice versa. He was a Jesuit as a priest, decades
Right.
before he
So
became the
so
Pope.
so
Yeah.
he didn't influence you. I'm just trying to see if this was somebody
Oh,
who at all.
in terms of my own story with this, which I guess I can
Yeah,
get back
I'm
to.
still trying to
Didn't
figure out.
realize I'd be
So
talking about this, but it's interesting.
well, listen, we've branched off, and we'll probably end up cutting out a lot of this because it's probably might be boring to listeners' ears, but it's okay. It will lead us somewhere
I
exciting. That's how I feel, you
um,
know.
I have to say I'll probably
I'm
keep it in.
curious
I
about the
think, yeah.
spirituality of what you felt like because you talked about reawakening your faith. Were you in college?
Yeah, yeah. It was when I joined, when I started college, I had been a teenage atheist
Really?
and excited for the potential debauchery of college and this sort of thing. And then when it was time to put the pedal to the metal, as it were, I became all of a sudden I realized like, oh, actually religion is probably good. Like we need something to keep us grounded. I was I was leaving home and there was this
Where was
reconnection I
home? Where
had.
did you grow up, if I can
I
ask?
grew yeah, I
And
kind of
you
grew up
can
in two
edit it
places. I mean,
out.
I no, no, it's all right. I mean, I didn't I thought we'd be talking more Godfather 3 and less personal, but it's all
Well, we
connected and
can
I
go.
probably
We
won't
can go back into the rest of it. I guess I'm
all
just.
good.
Oh,
We
well,
will. But yeah,
so anyway, but did somebody scout you on campus, or you yourself took yourself to a church?
I myself took myself to a church the first Sunday I was there. Went back, and this ties into Godfather 3 because we see Michael Corleone do
I
it. I
was
went to the
thinking of the confession. Yeah, I was thinking of
Yeah,
his
I did.
confession.
I
Yeah,
did something similar to that, except I
you
wasn't
didn't kill
confessing
your
killing my
brother.
brother,
I was
I
like, you didn't
had
kill your brother.
I had that scene of going back to confession for the first time in a while, the way Corleone does. It was relatable because I did do it, and it's funny to think. I was thinking this when I was seeing and it's one of the best scenes in the movie, of course, when he talks to the man who will become Pope John Paul I in the movie. It's such a great scene. I mean, and this man, I don't remember his Italian name before he becomes Pope John Paul I in the movie, but he says to Michael Corleone, like, "Do you want to make your confession?" Corleone's like, I'm not really. He essentially says like, "I'm not really like a good Catholic. I don't know if I'll actually like be repenting of this stuff." And the priest is like, "Well, what do you have to lose? Just like make this confession." And one thing I'll say that ties
Well, I think
into
the
my
concept
personal
of
life.
forgiveness
Yeah,
is what's so interesting in the movie, and I think it's what's interesting about the Catholic faith is I think that's what draws. I've visited Catholic churches when upset. It's funny, even though I'm not a Catholic, but there's an
yeah,
attraction there of the absolution. But it doesn't really.
absolutely.
Actually,
Yeah,
he does seem to want to
yeah.
be absolved. Actually, I should
He
say that, and that's
does.
why it's
He
such a
does, and I think
tragic
that he
movie.
has
And
a
that's also why
real.
he's moving the money and ending his mafia
He wants to
associations or trying
go
to.
legit. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Coppola is not a practicing Catholic, but he grew up. But once a Catholic, always a Catholic in so many ways, and I think that
I was
that
docked.
carries through. Exactly. It stays
But
within
whatever
you.
religion offers that absolution, so of course one could understand again how a gangster would want that because it's not just legitimacy, it's also the welcoming part.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's the welcoming part, and most religions have some version of like, you do this, and then you'll be living a just and good life. But with Catholicism, I think it's much
Well, not
more.
Judaism, and I think that's why it's having trouble this day and age. Really,
Perhaps, yeah, yeah, yeah.
really,
That makes
it's
sense.
not so easy to convert at all.
It's not so easy to convert, and yeah, I know. I talked about this on other podcasts. So again, being personal here, my girlfriend is Jewish, so I'm quite close to that as well. And I guess you just said you were
Well,
baptized.
that's
You said you were
easier the
baptized
other
Catholic.
way
Yeah,
because her family will be okay if you two have kids because it's considered through the mother's line. My father is Jewish, so
there
I
you
can do
go.
both
Yeah, yeah.
side Israel, but yeah, they don't. Whereas Catholicism, but again, the Muslim religion is also very open and free and very, I would say, welcoming. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have that reputation here yet, but actually, I've been
In
given
a
some
way, it
Quran.
is. Yeah,
Right, it
yeah.
is. It is welcoming, and that's sort
They
of what's going
want
on with
converts in a way
Michael.
that, yeah, yeah. In terms of him, being kind of welcomed back into the arms of the church, and just to finish the thought, I'll say this: like, even though I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore, and I don't really plan to be, obviously, otherwise I would just do it now. Otherwise I'd just hit the ground running now. I was thinking while watching him confessing to the priest, like, what are the chances that I will do this at some point in my life? Like, that I will make another confession. Whether or not
I think definite, whether
I
you're
think like
Catholic or
there's
not.
no way. I think like there's no way at some point in my life I'm not going to be like, regardless if I start going back to church, like I'm going to just like I'll run into a priest somewhere, or I'll be going through a hard time. I know that I'll want it.
You
I know
will
that it's
hurt
available to me.
someone.
Yeah, no. So the chances of me not having that Michael Corleone moment are very even if I'm not like, even if I wouldn't necessarily endorse that for myself now, like, yeah, I'm probably, it is a beautiful thing that I mean, it can be a neurotic thing for some people too. I'm definitely one of those people who like ended up going to confession like maybe almost too much, like, just
Were
getting
you like
addicted
that
almost to
guy
being
in
like, I
the
must
Da Vinci
absolve.
Code? A hair
I've never seen
shirt.
the Da Vinci Code. I've never seen the Da Vinci Code, and it wasn't like a hair shirt, me being harsh on myself. But just again with the Jesuits that I got to know at Cornell and developing that relationship, I would just go to them all the time. Come to them with my
Well,
difficulties
that's a
by
very
but
attractive thing because we're
it
not
is a
all
very attractive thing.
gangsters, but and we're not, all, giving the Catholic Church so much money. The fact that that's accessible for everyone, I think is, again, quite attractive. And I don't think that you can sin on purpose and then sort of be absolved. And that's what's interesting
Yeah,
about Michael with this is even though he's kind of doing it like, hey, I'm giving this tithe or whatever, or giving you all this, we're flipping this business so that I will be seen as such and such, but he means it. And I think that's what's interesting about the movie is that I feel he means it. And I think it's the
yeah.
confession scene.
I think, and again, Coppola is not, this movie is far from an ad for the Catholic Church. I think in a lot of ways it's critical of some of the things that you seem potentially critical of, and certainly some of the things that I'm potentially critical of. Obviously, I'm not a practicing Catholic
Like
anymore,
which
and it,
which are
and it ties into
fill
this.
us in on the things that you're critical of without,
Oh, I
or
think
within your
what
comfort.
I yeah, sure. What I come back to is just maybe it's not so much a spiritual issue with any of the church's teachings. Those certainly come up for anybody. But more so like, do I really trust the authority structure of this thing? Like, that's very important in Catholicism is respect for priests, respect for bishops, respect for the Pope, respect for the Vatican. And as we see in this movie, and as I think maps onto real life pretty well, the Vatican can be. I'm not saying it's necessarily more corrupt than any other religious institution or political institution or the mafia, but it's. I think one of the
Well,
points of
there's
The
somebody
Godfather
to
3 is
blame.
that
That's
it's.
how I feel, is because it's such a centralized religion. It's so hierarchical and it's so organized with its
Yeah,
hierarchy. There is no, to my knowledge, there's no, well, perhaps when there were caliphates, there was the head guy, but that hasn't been for at least 100 years. And even then, I think there were still, but in Catholicism, it's the Pope. So I think that
yeah, like that
owns its
that
own set.
trust, that ultimate trust and authority you're supposed to have is something that keeps me from like really being like Catholicism is the way. I guess it's just
Well,
the
does it
mixed
have to be
messaging, the
perfectly
fact
the
that.
way? I guess that's what I'm
No,
asking.
no, it
I
doesn't.
mean,
I'm not saying I'm not. I would never tell. So if I'm, when I talk to Catholics, I'm not like you shouldn't. I'm not proselytizing not being Catholic. You know what I mean? I think at some point with any religion, you take these leaps of faith. You understand that it's not perfect, but you do it anyway because it's good for you existentially, good for raising a family, whatever the case might be. I'm very sympathetic to that. My own life circumstances have sort of led me away from it. Is what I'd say. While still having a deep appreciation and respect for it.
well, I think there's a,
But
there's a, a lot of sincerity with the Catholic Church. Like a lot of people who I don't agree with, who are you know in politics, we'll
mm,
say, um, they really
yeah,
do believe it. And I don't know if it's just because of the absolution or the fraternal element. I think it's all of those things, and I think the structure sort of but like it provides a mode for behavior for, like, let's say politicians, etc. It's
it does. Well, that's what's
you
interesting.
know
Is it's such a big church that it can have these multiple levels of effect, and that's why you have some of the most outspoken sort of left of center social justice people are Catholic. By way of people who are under the sway of Jesuits, but also like the Catholic Worker magazine, and even in a more like slightly
Well,
center left way,
AOC
like
is a
Pelosi.
Catholic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
AOC, Pelosi. We were talking about
Look
the.
at
We'll
our
get back to
bench.
the. I mean, a lot of the conservative
Curtis.
Catholic. Yeah, a lot of the conservative judges are Catholic. You get both
I
like
think it's
right wing
6 of
and left wing
9 are
Catholicism.
Catholics.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other interesting thing. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that
yeah,
was from the original white privilege that which is, of course, the privilège du blanc. I don't know if I'm even saying it correctly, but I
yeah,
should. I'm half French. But anyway, which is only a few families, of somewhat royal bloodlines, I suppose, can wear the women can wear white in the presence of the Pope. In other words, Michelle Obama, this is still the political power of the church. Michelle Obama, who wouldn't, cover her hair when meeting, Saudi Arabian princes. Same with
right,
Melania Trump. She didn't do that either, which I thought was great. Be American, you're
yeah,
American, be respectful.
right,
But
yeah,
when they meet with the Pope, they're wearing the black doily on their head.
yeah.
Like
No,
a
it's
woman still has to cover her head. In other words, that's still the political power of the Catholic Church,
yeah, no,
which
it's
I think
interesting because I
is
mean,
really interesting.
it is interesting. In a lot of ways, the Catholic Church has never been. Catholics are kind of more in an analogous position to Jews, arguably, in the United States, in that the United States is deeply, deeply Protestant, and Catholics.
Isn't that?
But yeah, that's the question. Is I mean, Jews are much more of a minority, whereas Catholics, I think, still technically make up the plurality of religious people in the country.
They do, but it's
Um,
waning. I mean, they never got over the whole like
right,
molesting priests
which
thing. That has
probably ties into
really.
my own, I think that is another element that makes you question the authority is when they're not handling that stuff well. I mean, I hate to very cliche to distance yourself from Catholicism for that reason, but I mean that's always been looming, over my Catholicism my entire life. Without name drop or without getting too personal, I've
Well, I'm
definitely been.
sorry.
No, actually, wait. That the way I was presenting that sounded a
No,
lot
no,
worse
no.
than
I'm
it was.
not
I
saying no,
was
but I
not
mean, even if it's somebody
myself.
that's still,
Yeah,
you know,
was adjacent to priests who would later be accused, this sort of thing. So that sort of ties into my own doubts about it. If not from a spiritual perspective, then an authority perspective, like should I really trust, this kind of organization if it can't handle that, and if it even just for being in the position in the first place where predatory people would be rising through the ranks, for me, raise
but
some
I
questions.
think
But
that's
yeah,
sort of where we are again with the sort of, the politics of like San Francisco with the Catholic churches, is still very heavily involved in policy, etc. I kind of want you to touch on, in terms of bad people rising to the top. I think it's very hard to rise to the top of any, I don't know how the popes are, or to become pope. I don't know what goes on in those before they send up the smoke, but I imagine it's all politicking and it's,
yeah,
putting
it's very
oneself
political,
first
and you see a
and
little bit. Yeah,
right, and manipulation. So these are sort of the people who rule the world. But I guess what I'd like to know is sort of the
yeah,
Marxist theology. Hit that
right.
for me. I want to know about
Yeah,
that.
listen, I'm not. I don't know. I don't believe, that it's a huge force in the modern church or that it
I
ever
do.
has been. You do. All right. I'm
Yeah.
curious kind of your take on that. I think that, okay, so liberation theology is more like AOC, Bernie Sanders, or
Yeah.
something even further to the left. Whereas I think that the more standard progressive Catholic line is something more like Pelosi, a little more center left. That's why I'm not surprised, that Pope
Like in
Francis.
terms of
Yeah,
property and this sort of thing. Like when did liberation theology even become a thing? Like when did that
I
even
think it
I,
was. I could look it up, but I could
I
also
mean, the
just go
Catholics
off
have
of
always
memory.
been involved in revolutions in politics. Like think of the Third Estate and actually, pardon me, rather the First Estate. They were the First Estate and during the Ancien regime in France.
Right.
So
But
Right. I mean,
traditionally, the church has been on the rightward side of if not, certainly there's always been a progressive Christian and Catholic wavelength that people have tapped into.
yeah, yeah.
But,
How did this
communists
theology
in
come about?
Spanish
Are
Civil
these
War,
fake
for instance,
Catholics? Are no, but I mean, are these fake Catholics? Like, are these like, in other words, people like Marxists posing as Catholics, or how did even liberation
yeah, I mean,
theology? Because I think of Dr. King, also Martin Luther King, but
mhm,
he obviously wasn't Catholic, so I get
right.
confused.
Right. I mean, I think that a lot of rightward Catholics nowadays would say that yes, they're not Catholics. Some people even say like Jesuits are not Catholics. They're not real priests. This has never been, even though I am, pretty anti-communist and anti-Marxist. I've never viewed it that way. Like, I think that
And who's
people have
saying
an
that also? Are
appreciation for
these
the
just
Jesuits.
like anonymous people online? Or because I've noticed there's a real push to make the Catholic Church more orthodox and to me
Yeah, online there is
Muslim,
that.
almost Muslim.
Oh,
It's very like Albania, where it's that
yeah,
no, but you know what I mean, where it's that kind of
I do. Yeah.
mixture crashing.
There's certainly that contingent online, but it's not just online. There's always been a rightward group within Catholicism. Certainly, growing up that way, the Catholics I grew up around were largely right of center, for sure.
Well, that's
And
going to be our new country, if we have, really have a new population from mostly Catholic countries. They're
but
either
are they
socialist
right
or
of
Catholic.
center is the question. I mean, I think a lot of
No, they're
Latin American
socialists.
Catholicism is, and the difference breaks down. I mean, in this country, we think of socialists as socially progressive
Godless.
hipsters. But in other countries, it's a legitimate thing that you have people who are economically pretty socialist while still being socially pretty conservative. And I can't really speak to the individuals who made up liberation theology, but they were almost certainly or definitely anti-abortion, for example. And in the context of the 70s, probably not they probably did not necessarily break from Catholic orthodoxy with regard to things like LGBTQ issues, even though they might have
Right,
been more
which
sympathetic the
now
way the
has
Pope
totally
is.
flipped.
Yeah, yeah. They might be more sympathetic to like, looking at the human first, but liberation theology was not about morphing, was not necessarily about morphing Catholicism into, liberal socialism. It was more so, I think, saying, actually, like a good Catholic social order would be quite left wing, specifically in its economics. Is kind of my main
Well, I see
interpretation.
that
Yeah,
certainly in San Francisco. There's sort of like this, like the Nancy Pelosi Catholic that is, deep state Catholic that loves the Grateful Dead, which is like, as far as I know, a band of Jewish men. So there's this sort of, I guess it's like the sharing is
yeah,
caring, and I don't, it's hard to pin down
yeah,
when that flipped, but I really do believe a lot of what we're seeing now, there's sort of a mafia element to it in terms of, sort of importing labor, making these deals, etc. But who's doing it? They're doing it again with the Catholic Church, but there's like skirmishes going on within the church. And
oh,
I
big
guess to
time.
connect it to
Yeah.
the movie, yeah, to connect it to the movie, um, well, it's not tangential, but do you believe not just Michael, but do you believe
Mm-hmm.
the Pope? We don't see too much of him, but like, do you believe the Catholic characters in Godfather 3? Do you
Do I
believe that they're
believe that
faithful?
they're?
Do you think it's about God or a way of just doing things in the world?
I think. Well, I think part of the point of, I think the person who says it best is the man who I wish I remembered his Italian name, but the man who in the movie hears Michael Corleone's confession and goes on to
Yeah,
become Pope John Paul I. Said, there's that earlier in the scene we talked about with the confession. There's a scene where he takes a rock out of the fountain and says, this rock remains
touch it.
dry on the inside. So is European man with regard to Christ. He's been surrounded by Christ for nearly 2,000 years, but the water has not penetrated, and inside he is still dry. He is in the case of this character talking about European man. I believe he's basically saying, like, Italy, Europe is Catholic, but the goings on of the world are not, are not
Well, maybe
truly
it's like,
imbued with Christ. He's
wait,
remained
sorry,
separate. Yeah.
something just hit me just now as you're doing a great job of recalling that scene. Um,
Yeah.
in other words, it was the Nina. Okay, so it's the Catholic Church that set out for the New World first, really.
Right.
If not
Right.
first,
That's a good point.
certainly, right?
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus, at the behest, Spanish crown, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps this is, even though this movie's 30 years old, it's almost alluding to what we see going on politically now, which is, I don't know if Pelosi's involved, but this sort of Tim Walz certainly is with this.
Hmm.
Actually, she is
Yeah.
Pelosi. She doesn't say indigenous, but Gavin Newsom does, and so does his wife, his first partner. They
Right.
say Happy Indigenous Persons Day. There's been a
Right.
scandal
Yeah.
with indigenous schools that forced assimilation. So, in other words, now when you're talking about this rock being dry on the outside, is it that the European man is supposed to like crack open because we didn't do the right thing with the exploration? I'm not sure.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know
Because why
how
would he use
exactly
the
that
word
scene maps on
European?
reality.
Like, why would he even say that? I'm being really serious. Like, why would he say
Oh,
that?
well, I mean, I think that's fair enough. I mean, they're in Vatican City, and you know, um, it's not that
Yeah,
he
that's what I mean.
viewed
They're in Europe. So why is he,
right. I think because
what is he
he would
alluding to?
he's alluding to the fact that obviously the church has had this missionary mission in the world of spreading its teachings wide, and obviously that had affected the Americas, certainly Latin America, Canada, even at that time Africa and Asia would have been on the table too. But at core, he would have viewed Christianity and Catholicism as what it is and what it still is, although it's maybe slightly less politically correct or slightly less desirable for the Catholic Church to put it this way, but it still is a European religion. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I guess the truly faithful would say it's not a European religion. It is the
I
world's
feel they
religion.
would say
Christ,
it's European. I just find
but
it,
culturally, it's a European religion. There's no doubt about it. And I think he's focusing on the fact, the movie is about
see, that's what I mean is it
in
doesn't say
its
things,
core.
but
Yeah.
it's about what's going on now. Sorry, keep going. I'm listening.
No, no, it's okay. I think
In other
he's
words, he's talking about
focusing
the
on.
European. Hmm.
He's talking about the European. I think he's even specifically talking about the Italian, really. The movie's about the mafia and it's about the Vatican. The Vatican now, our current Pope's Argentine. Pope John Paul II was Polish.
German, not
Ratzinger
Polish.
was
Pardon me.
German. I believe prior to that,
Benedict?
origin of
No,
the church.
Benedict was Ratzinger.
No, Benedict was German. But back to Pope John Paul I and before, the vast majority of popes were Italian. Um, and
Exactly.
obviously
This is,
Vatican City. So there's a specific Italian tie-in, and I think I think that line is a reflection about. I mean, it definitely applies really well to Corleone. I mean, the movie itself is called The Godfather. The franchise itself is called The Godfather. It's very much, Catholicism haunts every one of the films. Maybe especially the third one, but all of them. And the point is, like,
well, it's
even
all
and
about
it's an irony.
absolution, but also self-flagellation. Like that's sort of like losing Mary at the end, right? Because in other words, you're going to suffer for your sins. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
sort of
So
it's sort of the man with himself.
what I would argue, and if I'd had all the time in the world, I would have not only watched the third installment, but the entire franchise again in prep for this pod. But I've seen the first and second
And
one.
if it's totally boring, we can erase it. No,
No, no, no,
don't
it's
worry.
okay. I've seen the first and the second film a number of times, and what I recall is that Catholicism is in the details of those movies. Obviously, the climax of the first film involves a baptism and Corleone becoming a godfather, etc. But first two movies, Catholicism doesn't really influence the plot at all that I can remember. This is very much
No, it's not a
exactly
faithful movie. Whereas I feel like in
no
Godfather 3, I feel like actually we're looking
kind
at
of
the inner parts of this man, him trying to let go. So to me, it's about the punishment absolution cycle of
yeah.
Catholicism. It is about sort of the hair shirt, if you will. And I love that you zeroed in on that scene with the stone. And I think the reason I was pestering you about the Europe thing is because we're not actually talking about going on a mission. So it's very it's just woven in there. And it's again woven into San Francisco with the whole Jim Jones thing with in other words, that wasn't Catholic, of course, but
Yeah.
this sort of, ministering to the poor, like the hippie element and
Yeah, it's a
changing
weird,
society.
no, absolutely. And, for as right wing and conservative as the church can be, it can kind of be amorphous enough to fuse with something like sort of hippie social justice, care for the poor, San Francisco politics. It's really amazing how these things work. I think one thing that I've sort of come to terms with as I've gotten somewhat older, I'm still only 29, but I'm becoming more of a more learned in the
Well, I
ways of the
think you're
world.
more well spoken. I won't even name the politicians, but then,
Well,
others
I
who,
appreciate it. But when I
no,
was
you're really
younger, I
good. And I
really
feel like
thought,
I've been boring on this, but you're which now you'll have to
no,
cut
not
that out.
not at all. This has been good. Um, growing up, I always thought like, that maybe there's some essential truth that the Catholic Church has, maybe there's some essential truth that, the Jewish religion has. And as I've gotten older, I've just realized just how amorphous things are with regard to religion.
I
People
think they're
use
all
their
true.
religion. Yeah, I think they're all true. And I also think they can all be used. People apply, like, I believe Nancy Pelosi, like, fully believes that Catholicism feeds in naturally to what she believes. But I also believe Mel Gibson thinks that, and I think people from across the political spectrum will use Catholicism, Judaism, Buddhism, all of these
As an
religions
excuse to
as
do
an
things.
yeah as in the
Absolutely.
worst
Like,
case as an excuse. Maybe there's a more positive spin that they use it as a source of inspiration. But what I've realized is, like, you really just can't. There's no, with regard to politics and religion always influencing each other. But at the end of the day, they're completely separate spheres, and I think it's quite dangerous
see,
to really. Yeah.
I totally disagree with you. How are
Okay.
they
Yeah.
separate spheres? I can't even, but because I think, do you mean religion rather than, in other words, faith, I guess is what I'm trying to say. To me, organized
Yeah.
religion is politics.
Okay. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think, and I don't want to be a terrible California cliche here. I think I have become a little more, growing up, I grew up Catholic. I never, ever heard someone's like, "Oh, I don't like organized religion, man. I'm spiritual, but not religious." I kind of rolled my eyes. But as I've gotten older, it's kind of hard to refute the appeal of that, because I do think, and I think this is a little bit the point of The Rock is dry on the inside scene. I think it's a little bit of the point of the whole movie, is that when you organize religiously, it becomes political, and very quickly, the real sort of sweetness at the core of religion begins to dry up and go away. I don't want to go on the record saying I'm against organized religion, because I think it's a very natural extension of the religious impulse, is to organize, is to teach, is to raise families, raise communities in it. I'm not against organized religion. However, I
Me
do
either.
think,
At the end of the day, I don't think anybody's fed more people or will feed. I don't think anyone will feed more hungry people tonight. And I will go on record saying this. You know what? I'm going to have to
yeah,
delete a lot of my Twitter posts maligning the Catholic Church, because truth be told, I don't think anybody will feed more hungry children tonight than the Catholic Church. Really.
no, it's absolutely true. Like, I'm not
So how could I
against
hate such an
organized. Yeah,
organization?
right. No, they do a lot of good, and I'm not against organized religion. I just do think there is a contradiction at the core of the very concept of organized religion.
Well,
And I guess
just be
that's,
frank
yeah,
about it. I guess that's my thing. And right now, in terms of the whole thing of politics, it's so majestic and so much, again, like almost like the Borgias, and with this, hierarchy, and sort of when it becomes almost like I call it hereditary peerages. To me, that's sort of like the Pelosi, Newsom, the Getty money,
yeah, yeah,
the Italian job here and there. And I feel almost as though the faith and the politics, when they're combined so much, or there's so much money, I don't know what it is, it loses its way. In other words, are we here to be at the Getty Mansion, conducting a wedding, Nancy
yeah,
Pelosi? Are you here to officiate and do that? And,
yeah.
or are we
Yeah,
here
no,
to feed hungry children? Like, what is the point of the Catholicism? Do we have it set up for everybody?
it's a worthy distinction you're making. I think I get the tie-in very much with Newsom and the rest of the California political clique, because like I do disagree with them politically, but I do also think that, looking at William Newsom's life, the father of Gavin Newsom, looking even at Pelosi, looking at Jerry
I think William
Brown,
was way better than his son. He did the Sierra Club. I think he was strange though, letting out the Chowchilla kidnappers, negotiating
oh
ear
yeah.
parts. Um,
Right.
and even
Um,
his father had gotten one of the Browns into office. So I just I guess what it is for all the religiousness, I don't understand what has become to me. They're more like mafia now, and I'll go on the record saying it. Gavin, Nancy, with your family ties, to me, you seem more like the Corleones than, a religious family. Like, I don't understand what they're
yeah, right,
doing.
right. Yeah. No, or I do understand what they're doing, but it's not
Yes, right,
necessarily
right.
flattering,
It,
right?
right. It's
I
so
think
much
that
self-enrichment. It has, they were set up this way with the Catholic Church, and using the Catholic Church again as I don't want to say as a cloak. Uh,
no, I don't think as a cloak originally, and I don't even think as a cloak now. I just think that the Catholicism, and another point, and I'm sure you know this, but this was, when you were mentioning all the sort of Catholic tie-ins of California politics leading up to this, it wasn't really something I thought much about, but I was looking into it, and indeed, Jerry Brown was actually studying to become a Jesuit before. I guess he dropped out of seminary, but he went on to
right.
become the
And then we
governor.
have Biden, our second Catholic, um,
Right.
it, it,
No, yeah,
it's,
I think that in as far as these people have socially it's kind of more left of center than hard left, but it nevertheless is a socially progressive agenda. I
well,
mean,
look at
I
Amy
think
Coney
that,
Barrett, right? I think she
yeah,
shocked everyone with her decision. Didn't she have some sort of open borders decision? And everybody had thought she was right wing and that her politics would, you know, line up with
right,
closing the border, I guess.
right, yeah, yeah. There's traditionally a lot of even conservative or right wing Catholics would be pro immigration. Why? I think just because of I mean, in the United States, there's like a more concrete thing of a lot of Latin American immigrants being Catholic. But I think it's even more general than that. Catholic literally means universal. Catholic integralism is a thing. There's a kind of a sense.
See, I
It,
don't even know what that is. What is that? Tell me. I love it. I'm talking to
let me,
a
rather than just
scholar.
shooting from the hip, let me get a good definition of it. It basically has to
And
do
and
with,
we can cut this up because and if I'm
yeah,
boring you,
no, it's okay.
just hang up. But I
Yeah.
love that you know so much. Like I'm talking to somebody with it. It's very funny. I will pat myself on the back for being psychic for even wanting to do this with you because you know more about Catholicism. I'll be frank. You might laugh at me, but than anybody I know. And maybe it's just
Maybe,
because
yeah.
also you're intellectual also.
I think it's
So
just
you're able
growing
to
up
point
around it.
out.
Like I'm not super well read on it. I've been around it
You are
enough.
compared to most people.
Integralism is kind of like hold on, let me see.
Yeah, it was like, give us the definition of this integralism. By the way, I just want to say Gavin Newsom, at least according to Battled Wikipedia, describes himself as some sort of Catholic. Again, he went to a
See,
Jesuit university,
yeah, and
but
I
a
didn't know that.
fighting
Yeah.
Irish. And I don't see anything Catholic about this man other than
No.
the
Yeah.
structured hierarchy and the political weight it pulls with, literally in terms of who's bussing people up here, it is Catholic charities mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, it really is interesting that I had no idea that Newsom would have identified as some kind of Catholic, I guess
I
are
just
his
realized
words.
Trump might win because of that. No, I'm
Do you think,
serious
wait,
because
what's that? Yeah.
Kamala's not Catholic, right?
She's not. Yeah, I had to look into that. I was
No,
curious,
her
kind of.
husband isn't.
No, yeah, he's Jewish.
Trump's
So
gonna win.
you think so? Because this idea that the Catholic vote, they typically vote
Well,
for the
I
winner,
believe
right?
that
Yeah.
Nancy made the call. I believe had they used Mark Kelly, I believe then we'd get Kamala. But I believe Nancy purposefully set up, walls. I think is just forget about it. Um, So he doesn't take it. So that way it will then be Gavin will take his throne after the 2028 Olympics. But where is this Catholic Gavin putting all the homeless? Like suffer the homeless, but where like I don't even know where they're going right now. So that's how
Yeah.
I see them as Corleones because like okay, you guys like I said, Nancy Pelosi has like a Grateful Dead poster in her office, which is so weird. Like, can you picture Nancy Pelosi at a Dead concert?
I don't know. I mean, I can't really picture Ann Coulter at one either, and she's apparently a fan. So the Deadhead thing is crosses a
It's
surprising
very
number of
Georgetown.
cultural
But wait, so
borders.
what
But
is
yeah.
this type of theology again? This
Oh, integralism. It may be
yeah.
off topic. I may have been slightly misusing the term, but it seems to me integralism was a sort of right wing response to liberal Catholicism that was still pro immigration. That from Wikipedia it says it was a movement that sought to assert a Catholic underpinning to all social and political action and to minimize or eliminate any competing ideological actors such as secular humanism and liberalism. Um,
Early
Integralism arose
1900s,
in.
when did this develop? Who was the thought
I
leader
would
on this?
say it's still very much a force in Catholicism. Let me see what it says here.
We'll have to do more
Uh,
investigating, by the way. Almost like I want to, is it wrong to look it up like now? I almost want to see the whole Kennedy,
yeah,
obviously there was the Kennedy relationship with the it was D'Alessandro is the name. And I believe I forget who's a priest, but anyway, with that family. The whole like even getting a Catholic, like you said, we are a deeply Protestant nation, but to even get a Catholic into I guess I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't understand the prejudice for Catholics. Maybe it's just I don't know why. I guess growing up in New York City, like everybody has religion of some sort or not.
right. I mean, do you think there's a prejudice for Catholics across American politics?
Definitely not. I think that you guys are way, like I said, you guys are way overrepresented. Like I said, with the bench, I've pointed, I've
Yeah.
maligned Catholics a lot, but like I said, they are feeding the most hungry. But I think their political representation is absolutely wrong, if I must say. Like to have six people
Yeah.
on the bench, that's insane. That's
Yeah. I mean,
insane
the
to me.
main theories I've heard
Of
about
the
the
Supreme
Supreme
Court.
Court have
Yeah.
to do with this notion. Traditionally, there's, I guess been a decent number of Jewish people on the bench too. Although, I mean, are there any right now? I don't even know. Maybe not.
Kagan
All right.
is, and
I
I
guess I
think
guess
just
only
Kagan.
the just Kagan. Heard kind of both. I've heard it said, that both Catholics and Jews are kind of brought up more intellect. This may just be total bullshit, but they're kind of brought up more intellectually in terms of
Well,
studying their religion,
see,
and
that's the thing
that
is I would
has to do with their success in realms like the Supreme Court. I don't know how fully
see. I think it's the
I buy into it. I
Georgetown
think
School of Foreign Service. I think we have the Berkeley wing of like real left wingers, which might be, you know, University of Chicago Pritzkers. It's only a few schools, right? Mostly that people come out of. There's Harvard and Yale. Yeah, Yale would be like the wasps of the wasps, which is half of Barack
yeah,
Obama, of course, even though he went to
right.
Harvard. But then we have, the Georgetown, like I said, School of Foreign Service, that's a very overrepresented. And I think when you're hitting on their method of teaching, I guess to me, I'll relate it to like Montessori. In other words, you're talking about
Hmm.
like I've heard they're called the warrior priests. What do they actually teach when they're inculcating you with their theology? Like what are they saying to their young warrior trainers or trainees?
Yeah, I don't. Well, this kind of ties back to one of the founding questions you had about, what is it about Jesuits? Because Georgetown's, of
Yeah.
course, a Jesuit university. I didn't go to Georgetown, but I did. I was exposed to Jesuits at Cornell. What exactly is it? I mean, it's not. They're not open Marxists. They're not even necessarily openly super liberal, but it is a certain view that has to do with Catholic social teaching about it comes down to a very well-intentioned thing, I think, of kind of helping the poor and the downtrodden, which in this country is very much identified with the non-WASP, the immigrant, and of course just the poor. Generally, all of it's very well intentioned. There's no doubt that they do a lot of good. But you're not going to find a lot of. You're actually maybe going to find no Jesuits who are pro-abortion or anything like that. Like there are certain Catholic teachings that are in a conservative direction that you're not going to find. I mean, Pelosi obviously is
I was
pro-abortion.
just saying,
This
but she still
California
got her
clique.
communion. She still got her communion. Like I didn't understand how that. And
Well, I won't even give a firm opinion. I mean, I don't want to say people should be denied communion or anything like that. But I just mean even
I
among the
think they should be, and
clergy.
I'm pro-choice because I will never say that like a seahorse has the same rights that I do. But
Right.
once it becomes
But
a
you
baby,
think that the
sure.
Catholicism has its own, yeah, like Catholicism has its own inner logic
I think if
about
that's a
that
tenet
issue.
of your religion, it's like saying that you can eat pork, as let's say
Yeah.
a Muslim or an Orthodox Jew. I think
No,
that
I
it
think
goes
so. Yeah,
so
I
far
think that's
against
fair.
it to
Yeah.
me. I don't think it's right. You
No,
know,
and lo and behold, like even though you have very high profile Catholics who are pro-abortion, like Pelosi, within the clergy, I think I can't I can't think of any like priest who's ever been pro-abortion. It's something I could Google now, but it's not. You just can't be if you're like
what's
actually
going on
clergy
with
within the church.
Argentina, by the way, with Milei? Do you know that it's now legal to sell a kidney there? So, like, how does that square with libertarianism and this sort of like open, rampant capitalism? Like, but our Pope is from there? I'm
Well,
confused.
I don't know what Pope Francis has said about Millet, but I can only assume that the two don't see eye to eye and don't like each other. Millet is the almost the opposite kind of Argentine political force as the Pope, arguably.
I probably okay, I don't have to go yet, but I do have to go at like 7:40. But
No,
I
it's
want to get
okay.
into something else, which is the sort of
Yeah.
political machinations of not just the Corleone, but going on with Catholicism now. We were talking about the Catholic bench. Not just that,
Yeah.
but sort of this walking towards that of how did we even set up that I don't know off the top of my head when we first I believe it was in the 1980s that we first
Hmm.
had a and I don't know if it was, are you familiar with Leonard Leo, Catholic thought leader,
No, I'm
warrior for
not. Yeah.
Christ? Oh wow, get
No,
into him. Supposedly
Leonard
he's like
Rio. Yeah.
Leonard Leo. Yeah, supposedly, he's been active since the 80s, is active now. Um very, of course, politically Catholic. But in other words, what steps were taken to reestablish that the Holy See, that we would have an ambassador, that the United States would, treat the Holy See as though it's a state, because we didn't do that. As far as I'm remembering correctly, I believe we didn't do it until the 80s. Then we didn't do it for a while. We had no ambassadors there. And then Trump sent Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know anything about that, but I know
Oh,
that
so that's what
it is
I
a
guess
little
what I'm
bit.
trying to say is I've
Yeah,
noticed the Catholics have made such an encroachment in our daily lives that and it has been almost like a mafia tactic. That's why it's very strange to me, this whole, with their being okay with abortion and just like kind of like abandoning any, to me, semblance of Catholic symbols, yet still wielding the power of the church politically, I guess is what I'm trying to say. To me, they're less sincere, they, meaning California supposed Catholics, are less sincere than Michael Corleone. I believe he really wanted to make a change. Whereas I'm not quite sure I
yeah.
believe these guys.
No, yeah. I mean, this is we can kind of use this as a way because yeah, I know you said you had to leave somewhat soon, so we can use this as a way to sort of circle the wagons for home here. I mean, to talk about the movie for a second, I think, and we've already said it. Anyone who's seen the movie knows, but it does very much become a story of Catholic absolution. And I do think, as tragic and unfortunate as the ending of the movie is, I do think it is a somewhat tragic redemption story for Michael Corleone. He makes this confession, and he kind of says like, "I'll do anything, and I'll live justly from this day forth." Not to the priest. I think he says that in a subsequent scene when he's praying. over the body of his dead friend, I believe, who's assassinated. He kind of, but even going to before the end, before that kind of more dramatic scene, the whole movie is about him
With
wanting
Mary,
to
yeah.
go. Yeah, it was the whole movie is about him wanting to go clean, and for him and for his family, to establish legitimate business rather than being mafia. It's the story of him seeking that absolution ultimately, and he ultimately sort of, regardless of, it's not like a strictly Catholic movie. He kind of, not just in front of the priest and the church, but rather just kind of to himself and to the world and to us, the viewer. He says like, I will, be just going forth, and like whatever that takes, I'll do it. Now, in our head as the audience, and probably in his head, it's a question of like, is he gonna die? And the coda of the movie, the retitle that Coppola gave the movie was The Death of Michael Corleone. So it's, everything is set up. And in fact, if I'm recalling correctly, the movie as originally envisioned was going to be him dying. But then rather than him dying, something vastly, vastly worse happens, which is that his innocent daughter, played by Sofia Coppola, Mary Corleone, is tragically killed right there in his arms at the foot of the Opera House. And it's almost, I don't think it's anything too dark or twisted, but it's almost like that is, his daughter becomes the like sacrificial lamb.
Well, it's very
for
religious,
his
right? Because
sins.
wasn't
Yes,
that, I don't know if the Catholics do Abraham and Sarah, or is it, well,
for
no, they
sure.
were the
Yeah,
old
yeah,
couple, but wasn't someone supposed to kill his son?
yeah. Abraham and Isaac. So it's kind of
Okay.
like that, but which then which is, that's a story in both
In other words,
Judaism
he's
and Catholicism.
achieving
But
the suffering that, in other words, do you think by suffering that badly, the way that, because notice when he's making the confession, he is talking about his father's son, his mother's son. Not even, I'm sure he said, well, of course he says my brother, but it's about what he did to the parents, what he did to his own
yeah,
parents.
he's putting it in that strange way, to kind of underscore the horror of it. It's not that he's avoiding saying I killed my brother. It's more that not only
No,
did I
no,
kill my
that's what
brother,
I'm
I killed
saying
my
is to
father's
me,
son, my mother's
and then
son.
he loses
Yeah,
his daughter, and then he
right.
loses his daughter. So to me, it's like, although to me, it didn't
And
seem
like
like
that,
absolution at first. Sorry, go on.
no, it's okay. I think that, it has to do with the I don't know. It's open for interpretation whether or not he achieves absolution. I kind of lean towards viewing it that way, that he does ultimately, after suffering this immense loss, like that the books are balanced. But I will say
That's what I was
that's not
thinking.
a
Yeah.
super Catholic take on it. That's almost more like, without bringing a whole other set of religious symbolism in that I don't fully understand. It's almost something more like what we think of as karma or something. You know what I mean?
To me, I think that
He
is
get
the Catholic take, is that you have to don't make me quote Metallica, do you bury me when I'm gone each time I
hmm,
disappear? In other words, no, but like by the time I understand, in other words, you can't be sainted or martyred unless you have the pain, unless you
yeah.
have pain.
No, so it's aesthetically Catholic. I don't know if it's like metaphysically Catholic, if that makes sense. I don't know if Coppola is saying like, look, this is God, Jesus through the church acting in Michael Corleone's life, but it does map onto the general theme of sin and absolution very, very well. And that's, to me, another subject here that we kind of touched on in the beginning is the question of, is Godfather 3 a good movie or not? Obviously, a lot of critics and audiences didn't think so in 1990. I really think it is a very good movie. For as much as it differs from the other Godfather films, it's very narratively satisfying to me, because it brings the narrative to such a tragic but at the same time deeply satisfying conclusion of like, yes, you can leave the past behind, but not without, paying a dire price. And that's ultimately the message. Whether it's to the degree to which that's Catholic or not, I don't know. I mean, it's related definitely to that idea of absolution and Catholicism and the hair shirt. There's no doubt about that. Without mapping onto it perfectly, like it's not a Catholic movie the way, I'm trying to think of an example of
See,
a
the way
movie
you've
that is.
explained it now, I think
Yeah,
it's so darn Catholic. Sorry, but what would be more
sure.
Catholic? Not the Da Vinci Code, because you haven't seen it, but
I guess like the Passion of Christ or something. It's not dogmatically Catholic. It's sort of aesthetically and spiritually Catholic without like actually affirming the church's teachings is kind of my read on it. You know what's a
really.
more
Now,
Catholic
how
movie? Speaking of Georgetown, or speaking of Jesuits,
Mhm.
a more Catholic movie would be The Exorcist. In The Exorcist, the
Whoa,
church
whoa,
is
whoa,
right.
whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
Hold the phone, rewind the plane, do the whole thing. Ha Speak. How? More Catholic.
That would be another whole other topic. I don't want to focus on The Godfather, but
Okay.
I think within The
Mhm.
Exorcist, God is good. The Catholic Church are the only group that has the tools to combat the devil. The devil is real and possesses people, and the priests are the ones who must combat the devil. Whereas in the universe of The Godfather 3, I think it's quite agnostic as to whether or not God or the devil exists. However, what is very Catholic is the narrative itself, is the functioning of the nature of sin being redeemed by way of violence and death and sacrifice.
Well,
Um,
suffering, they
does
crown
that
it.
make sense? In suffering,
No, it
it's
makes
like
total sense, but
the
I'm still
narrative mirrors of Christianity without necessarily
see
affirming the
to
reality of the church as the institution
no, but
that
is there
has the
text
spiritual
that
good
talks
stuff.
about sorry, is there text that talks about exorcisms? I didn't know about that. Is there
Oh,
really?
for sure. I mean, exorcists are real. Like
It
that is a
says so in the
real job.
Bible? When?
There is stuff in the Bible. I mean, you'd have to ask a Protestant to be able to quote the Bible.
But
But
then it wouldn't be a
Christ throws
Catholic.
out demons, etc.
Haha.
What's that?
I don't I just don't think that The Exorcist is more Catholic.
I think that it's Catholic in a completely different way. I just mean that
Although how can I argue with you when I know nothing?
no, it's okay. I'm not trying to be a philosophy professor here, but the
No,
distinction
I
I'm making
love
is
it.
like
No, I'm
aesthetically,
intrigued.
sort of emotionally, narratively versus metaphysically. Like metaphysically being like
Okay.
Jesus is real and the Catholic Church is
Right, right.
is
Because you're right.
his
There's so
church.
much unsaid.
Yeah,
There's so much
I would say
unsaid in the
Godfather
movie.
3 I would say Godfather 3 does not endorse the idea that the Catholic Church is Christ's church. I would say that it shows that the Catholic Church is as corrupt as any other human endeavor, but that there is this core of Christianity that relates intimately to our own lives. That's what I would say about the Godfather 3
Well, I
because
think it's very
Michael
richly.
Corleone lives it. Yeah.
But so it's a good movie. I agree with you. I think it's very inaccessible. And I don't think we're
Yeah.
making excuses for loving it. I think life is deep. It can't all be blowing up cars, Hyman Roth, Shirley Temple, or not
Yeah.
Shirley Temple, but it can't all be that. Life isn't that. I think that powerful people are very solitary. I think that, like let's say, and also as you get older, like I think Pelosi is more solitary than Newsom. I think this is a
Right.
part of life as you're reflecting on your legacy, etc. So yeah, it's a good movie. Do you think he opened the door with it? Coppola?
Open the
I feel as though he
door.
opened the door for sequels. I'm really serious when I said that
Oh,
to you
I
in
think he
earlier.
had ideas of maybe making sequels, and this did badly critically and maybe even somewhat less than desirably. I think it did okay commercially, but oh yeah, you could have made more. We didn't even talk about and he's not as relevant to the topics of today's talk. We didn't even talk about Andy Garcia's character, who's very good. Vincent Corleone in the movie. He becomes the He becomes the Michael Corleone in this movie. I watched Coppola's
What
commentary.
happened with him? He
Yeah,
did Mambo Kings. He did this,
I
and
don't
then
know
he
what. I
like,
mean, let me.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
he's not.
I feel
I
like
mean,
he's
he
so
had a
good.
career, but he's
Yeah,
great in
but
it.
uh,
Yeah,
we got to
Coppola
find
definitely
out,
opened
is
the
he
door.
crazy? Hmm?
Yeah, maybe. Let me see. But
Well, I always
are you?
wonder when people disappear, you know?
Yeah, I think he stayed around. I think I'm looking at pictures of him now. He looks okay. He looks like he stayed busy. I just don't think he was maybe ever as big of a star as he was in this particular movie. Is kind of my read. This seems to be really his best. I mean, 2008 Beverly Hills Chihuahua. Like, I
Oh
just
my
maybe not.
God.
I
Oh
mean,
my
that's
God.
unfair to bring up that one. I
I
just
mean,
think he
I don't want to be
became.
unkind, but is that a sequel or what is a Beverly Hills? Is that like the dog from the Legally Blondes? But wait,
It was a kids movie from 2008, but I think he basically he would seem that he had real leading man gusto in this movie, and it doesn't necessarily seem as if he really ever matched that ever again.
We'd have
But
to figure out like what went on there, but I guess my whole thing is with this film and all that's unsaid. Do you think that that's how it works? We see a little bit of the inner corridors of power, but I feel like a lot less is said in this movie. And
it's not too heavy-handed. Yeah.
than when he's having the meeting and like giving everybody their walking papers, which I thought was very odd. That part to me stuck out as so it didn't fit in with the script well because
Which scene? What scene are we talking about?
when he's, I'm going straight, you're all retiring. Here's your bonus.
Oh yeah, that scene. It's not bad, but yeah, there are a few
I thought
scenes like that
tonally I
are
didn't quite
yeah.
get what was, and I do
Yeah,
love
there's
his
as
sister in it also.
yeah, no, for sure. Which is Coppola's real life sister.
Yeah,
There's yeah. No, there's a few. Listen, I like the movie. I'll defend it. There's a few scenes like that that do yeah. There's some weird tonal stuff that happens where certain scenes feel like maybe they were shot a little faster than they should have been or something. And I would definitely say that
why
this
it's a
topic
good
of
movie?
Sophia was that
Because we're thinking about life, faith, the solitary man, politics, the corridors of power. And we could talk a little bit about that with like two or whatever, or one with the, Hyman Roth, the gambling, the racetrack, the film studio. Oh, we're in Cuba. But it's quick hits, it's a pop magazine. It's whereas this is like a contemplative, like head scratching, like think about life movie. So isn't that
for
kind of what
sure.
art is supposed to do? Maybe I sound
Yes.
funny, I don't know.
No, I agree, and that's a good note to sort of start to. I know you
Yeah,
have to
let's
go
wind
in a
it up.
minute, so
Yeah.
that's a good note to sort of wind it up a little bit on. Like, yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect movie, and I do think the first two Godfathers are better movies. I don't think you can really, and I think that's why Coppola says it's a coda. Like in his mind, it's not part three so much as a coda to the previous two movies. You can't really fully appreciate it on its own. But certainly it passes the test of being a great movie, of being a work of art by dealing with these very, very real themes, and it does so in a way where, as good as the first two movies are, like this offers a much more introspective look, definitely at the Catholic angle, but really at the whole series and the nature of succession and the nature of family and the nature of the influence of spirituality and Catholicism on
I
Corleone.
dare
It's
say
all
I think it's the
punctuated by
best
this. Yeah,
one. As you're talking
really.
about this, you
Yeah,
know why? The others are more entertaining. It depends on what you want a movie to do.
but
Do
yeah,
you
of
want
course. Yeah,
it to challenge you? Do you want it to be not unenjoyable, but like, do you want it to like poke you in the ribs? Is it that? By the way, Upstream Color, my favorite movie ever. I still don't know if I understand it. Go see it. It's amazing. But
yeah, it's good. Yeah,
I think about it 10 years later. So this movie I think about more, whereas the other two are reliant on like flashbacks. You've got De Niro, you have so much zhuzh, you've got so much, I don't want to say cheap shots, but like almost like a title card, wham bam bam, makeover scene. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
somebody begging, De Niro, not De Niro, pardon me. Actually, was it De Niro in that scene? Begging him in the tenement. In other words, this doesn't rely on any of that. There's no
No, and I
gorgeous
think
like
that's
woman in a car here.
no. I mean, and that's why I think the third installment. Like, look, if someone wanted to do a podcast on either Godfather one or two or both of them, I mean, there's enough to talk about there, but it's a little bit talked to death in a way. Whereas with this third one, I think there's still more to dig into, which is why, to the point Matt made at the top of this podcast, like the fact that there's like this reappreciation for it and movies like it is because the millennial and down audience kind of knows like there's still stuff to dig in here. These were movies that were not fully appreciated or talked about in their time, and there's still things that we can kind of dig into.
And on that note, I will, well, it's your podcast, but I will go. Can I
No, it
just
sounds
say,
good.
as an aside, I think you should probably like cut like half of this out. But you know what we did here? You took
Yeah,
me through the faith more than I would have gone, Matt, because to me, you're still a person of faith, and you knew about the Jesuits, you knew about a lot of this politically. And nobody's done it like this. Nobody's talked about this. Like, there's actually a
Yeah,
lot of
no,
stuff
I
on
think
Godfather
there's
3, but
still
nobody's talked about,
no, yeah,
listen,
yeah.
the high-minded part of, like, do these people believe it? Is it just a framework to do their immigration? What is it?
Yeah,
You
and I
know?
feel like we didn't ultimately answer the question, but we raised the question, which is interesting. I was gonna say I will let you go. I don't want to keep you longer than you
Wait, what was
have.
the question before I go? Because actually it's an 8 o'clock
Oh,
call I have, but what was
oh
the
no, no, no.
question?
All good. I mean, just the question of like to what extent is Catholicism just a framework for some of these political machinations, or to what extent is there a genuine faith and spirituality behind these political machinations? I don't know if we have answered. I don't know if we've been able to definitively say yes or no. I think it's a very gray area. Um,
I
that
think
was the
actually
question. Is like,
scarily they believe it when I think about it, because I know Georgetown
yeah,
Jesuits.
but yeah,
Because it
I think they
allows
believe it.
them, much like the Muslims, love
Yeah,
love you all, but it gives you
no,
that
I think
power back.
it gives you that power back, and it makes it as religion does for anyone in all walks of life. It roots you in the world more so. Everyone wants to be able to go to bed at night feeling like they're doing God's work, and I think that's a really important. Just in we'll let you go to kind of bring the Newsom Pelosi of it all to an end. I mean, I think we can be very critical of them. I don't think they're good Catholics or anything like that, but I do think Catholicism for them is a way of being able to go to bed at night and feeling like they're doing God's work. And whether that's something it would be very
See,
critical of, or whether
him
it's
no, her yes. Him no.
him, no, her,
No.
yes. Oh, yeah, no, fair enough, actually, because Pelosi kind of has that more boomer mindset of like having grown up Catholic but believing in progressivism. Yeah, I would actually agree with that too. Newsom does seem
Well,
a little
for me,
more
it's a
cynical, but
Capricorn moon. Same as Napoleon, same as me, same as George Washington.
Newsom
Unfortunately,
has a
Hitler.
cat moon. Yeah,
Yeah,
all of
we
those
can talk
people.
about that. I'm gonna
Yeah,
let you go because I've talked your ear off. But wait,
no, it's
you
okay.
finish.
This
I
is
will
great.
be quiet for a whole minute.
Oh no, I pretty much said my piece. I think that I think that we raised more questions than we answered on this podcast with regard to Catholicism. But sometimes it's more about asking the questions than answering them with topics as big as this. And hopefully, listeners don't think we went too off topic from Godfather Part 3. But hopefully, if you haven't seen the movie, what we've said here is enough to get you interested, because it really is a very good movie and an underappreciated movie. And Chloe, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for
Well, thank
inspiring me to
you.
watch and think about Godfather Part 3.
Well, wait. Have you advertised it?
Advertise this podcast?
Yeah.
No, but I'll put some
I would
promotion out
consider
before.
reframing it a question of faith, however you want to, but feel free to reframe it any way you want to. And I'm sorry
Yeah.
I talked so long, but I
No, no,
really
no. You're good.
appreciate
Yep.
you having me. You're a smart guy, and I think you're going to
Yeah.
go really far.
Thank
I
you. I
do.
really
I
appreciate
do.
it. And let's do
Yeah.
it again sometime. Stay in touch.
All right. Bye. Bye.
All
Thank
right.
you,
Take
Matt.
care. Bye.
Bye.